Hello and good evening to everybody. Second attempt. We are quite in good spirits, so I hope you'll join us soon. I also say hi to everybody looking to us in our media coverage. Over there, media, over there, everybody. Hi. I'm very glad that I have a special guest here among us. She calls herself an energy healer. She has background in insurance marketing and in finances, I guess, coming from a military family. And she was a campaign organizer for Bernie Sanders, who was a Democratic presidential contender in 2016, much of like her previous boss, Alexandria. But her only previous experience regarding campaign was a far-left counselor, which he lost the campaign, the position. All or nothing, okay. But now, a campaign manager and the woman behind the phenomenon of the American politics, who we call Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
AOC.
AOC. The youngest American congresswoman ever elected and the new hope of American progressives.
And progressives around the world, I'm getting the impression.
Progressives around the world, European as well. I give you Miss Virginia Ramos Rios, as we like to call her, Vigi.
Yes, thank you all. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really happy. Njene, who invited me originally, has been talking to me for like several months about coming. So I was really excited to be able to actually be here. Thank you.
For introduction, I have a short video that would put us in the mood and to see what Alexandria and the team, together with Vigi, were campaigning for. Please.
Women like me aren't supposed to run for office. I wasn't born to a wealthy or powerful family. Mother from Puerto Rico, dad from the South Bronx. I was born in a place where your zip code determines your destiny. My name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm an educator, an organizer, a working-class New Yorker. I've worked with expectant mothers, I've waited tables and led classrooms. And going into politics wasn't in the plan. But after 20 years of the same representation, we have to ask, who has New York been changing for? Every day gets harder for working families like mine to get by. The rent gets higher, healthcare covers less, and our income stays the same. It's clear that these changes haven't been for us, and we deserve a champion. It's time to fight for a New York that working families can afford. That's why I'm running for Congress. This race is about people versus money. We've got people, they've got money. It's time we acknowledge that not all Democrats are the same. That a Democrat who takes corporate money, profits off foreclosure, doesn't live here, doesn't send his kids to our schools, doesn't drink our water or breathe our air, cannot possibly represent us. What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a federal jobs guarantee, and criminal justice reform. We can do it now. It doesn't take 100 years to do this. It takes political courage. A New York for the many is possible. It's time for one of us. Vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on June 26th.
Very nice. Almost makes me cry every single time, but in a positive way.
Yeah,
exactly. The video of Alexandria starts with, women like me are not supposed to run for the office. I wasn't born into a wealthy or powerful family. I was born in a place where your zip code determines your destiny. That's her words, that's the beginning of this video. And you led a very unconventional campaign. I mean, Alexandria, she won her congressional victory over a 10-year incumbent, Joe Crowley, also a Democrat, but a candidate...
10 terms, so 20 years.
20 years, yeah. So, but a candidate who spent $3.4 million for the same campaign that you were doing, That's 10 times more than Alexandria, if I am correct.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do differently? Tell us about your fight, people versus money.
So part of the whole journey for us is that very concept of people versus money was that we didn't have the money. There was no competing on that level. So there were a few things, even before I came onto the campaign, one of the things that Alexandria did that I think was amazing was that she made a concerted effort to be out there directly listening to the district. And she had an advantage in the sense that she was living in the district. But she went to every meeting, every organization, every place where there were people gathering around a particular issue or to celebrate something. And she was talking, but more so she was listening to the people in her district about what were the concerns, what were the things that were keeping them up at night. And it wasn't a concerted like polling effort or, hey, let me sit down with you one-on-one and have. It was literally just being present in her community for the longest time to actually be listening to them and finding out what they were talking about as being of a concern. That was the start of it. But then we continued with inviting people to be a part of this who had never taken part in a political campaign. Both Alexandria and I woke up with the Bernie Sanders campaign, and we talked about the fact that neither one of us, I mean, for her, she's pretty young, and me, I studied political science, and then I did what I call go to sleep, which I feel like a lot of people did, which is, yeah, I vote in the general elections, you know, I pay attention, but I wasn't active. I wasn't out there with a candidate or listening or considering all of their issues. It was kind of like, okay, who am I going to vote for when I walked into the booth? Like, I think there's a lot of people who do, even to this day. So the other thing that we were doing was welcoming a team, welcoming people to be a part of the process, and to go, you don't have to have a curriculum vitae where you've studied political science at university or where you've campaigned for hundreds of other candidates. You just have to have a willingness to be out there and to be willing to talk to other people. And actually, we had some people who volunteered who was like, I'm not good at talking to people. No phone, no talking face to face. I'm like, great, here's some chalk. And they would go chalk things and like, write, you make sure you vote today. You know, there were people who were like, I'm great with data. Like, great, we need people to enter data. You don't always have to be, you know, like there were people who was like, no. What I loved were the people who started with, I can't talk to people, no. You know, like I'm happy to come fold shirts in the campaign office, whatever. What I loved was some of these very people, the chalk people and the enter data and the fold t-shirts folks became some of the best people talking because they would get asked questions. And because they'd been present and they'd been listening and they'd been a part of it, they'd have answers that their friends had never heard before. And they were the people that got looked at and they're like, oh, wow, but you don't talk to people. You're not involved in politics, but you're talking about this? Well, she's something special then. We need to know what's going on here. The other thing, and I have to thank the PES for this because I actually got this particular lesson as a conscious thing after I got invited to Lisbon to speak at a campaign camp, candidate forum. When I was flying back, I ended up randomly in the airport waiting area sitting next to this young woman who we started talking, and she's like, hey, I just ran a campaign in Pennsylvania. We were obviously going back to the U.S., so, you know, and she's like, hi, I ran a campaign. And I'm like, oh, that's great. We should be in touch. So I take out my card and I give her my card, and she looks at it and she goes, wait a second, you're VG? And I'm thinking, oh, she's heard of AOC. That's what this is about. I'm like, yeah, I'm VG. And she's like, oh my God, I was actually in Jabari Brisport's office, and you guys played Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was so much fun. And it was like, I played Guardians of the Galaxy throughout my whole campaign. And I was like, oh, wow, I never thought about the fact that making that office fun meant that people came back, and that she took that lesson and applied it to the campaign that she ran outside of Philly. I was like, oh, that's an important lesson. Somebody had her here so that I could learn something. She learned something from me, but I learned something back from her. That when you make it something that other people look at and they're like, hey, those people are having a good time. Like, nobody thinks they have a chance in hell in winning. Like, this is what we were told, honestly. They're like, She's running against the fourth most powerful Democrat in the entire United States. He is the preeminent of the young part of the Democratic Party. He was 56 years old, by the way. That was the young part. He has the chance to, if the Democrats take over Congress, he has the chance to be the next Speaker of the House. How great would it be if New York State had both the Senate leader and the House leader? Yeah. Why would we give that up? There's no way she can win. No. It's like, but we're winning every day. Like, this is what we looked at. It's like, we're winning every day that somebody else takes and considers these issues important. We're winning every day that people feel like, hey, there's a chance to actually use my power as a voter to elect somebody who truly represents me and my issues. And we celebrated every single win. There's going to be a movie called Knock Down the House that's going to be on Netflix. And I don't know if you guys will get it at the same time. We're supposed to get it starting May 1st. But part of that, and I just remember it briefly, is I remember Rachel Lears, who's the director, was with us when we went to turn in the petitions. In New York, to get on the ballot, you have to collect a certain number of signatures from people who are members of your party. We celebrated that as if, like, we made it. Like everybody kept telling us, oh, they're going to challenge you, they're going to knock you off the ballot, because this is what the Queens and Bronx Democratic parties are known for. Like, you come and you're not sanctioned by the party to run, we're going to knock you off the ballot. And we were like, they will not be able to knock us off the ballot. We know we made it. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, these were the kinds of things we were celebrating. We celebrated every single win along the way. When we got another group who, like, we would have the officials going, oh, we can't come out against you. In New York, one of the other things is the heads of our parties are known for finding ways to cut funding for groups that come out against them, right? So people are like, look, we really love what you're saying, but I can't come out for you, right? I'm like, that's okay. We'll talk to your membership. We go directly to the people, and your membership is with us. You guys go ahead. You be with Crowley. You be where you need to be to safeguard your fundraising. But we happen to know that your people, they're with us. And it was true. It's what happened. And afterwards, after we won the primary, we actually had people going, oh, we're so sorry we couldn't be there. And they were expecting us to go away. We don't want to talk to you. That's not how we operated. Again, I told you, we welcome the people who want to be with us and who are willing to fight the good fight. So we were like, great, how do we work together moving forward? And I have so many of them who, through other friends and stuff, they're in shock. They were expecting you guys to cold shoulder them. They were expecting you guys not to talk to them. It's like, why would we do that? How do we accomplish anything by not talking to the very people we need to talk to and work with? You've got to open that dialogue. So making it fun, listening to the people, but it's also about having a vision and being, like what Alexandria had talked about there was also very human. She's very authentic. When you talk about those being her words, they really are. She wrote that. This wasn't somebody else wrote a script and she said it. She wrote that script. Those are her words. And she talked from a very authentic and real place. I consider it coming from an energy sphere, like a soul place of her reality. And even how people had been talking to her about, like, please, you don't have corporate backing. You don't have a famous family name. There's no way you can win this. That's how people talk to her. And so when she talked about it, it was so, I think that even to this day, I know that I was feeling it, but I think you can feel that she's coming from that really real, raw place when she's talking about this. But then she also talks about the vision she has of the world that we can build together. And she talks about the values that she's bringing in to how she goes about making decisions. And these are elements that I think are critical for as we continue moving forward on how do we revitalize groups? How do we get people more involved? How do we have folks not see just the polarizing us versus them as the only way that we move this forward? How can we have them actually come into the concept of working together, collectively, holistically, being there to support each other. And you do that by being authentic, by being real, and by being human. Like, these are some of the things that we did. The other thing I will tell you is that when you have that candidate that is coming forth with that, it changes the dialogue. Here's one of the things that I will say is coming from marketing. I always look at it as the people that are out there, whether you're trying to get them to vote for you or buy your product, you need to respect them and welcome them as part of the process. Because as soon as you start thinking of them as people who don't know what they want or don't know what they're talking about, in my opinion, you've ultimately lost. So knowing that who your audience is and where they're coming from is critical. But then there's also the fact that, and this is the marketing aspect of what we did differently, which was talking to people about what was in this race for them. So when I was sending people out to knock doors, we weren't sending them out with, here's your laundry list, go through all of these things, this is where she's at. We had that. But I literally said to them, first, tell them a little bit, I'm a volunteer. I'm out here because I'm really excited about Alexandria, and this is why. That's great. But your next question needs to be, what is their concern? What is their issue? What would get them to vote? What keeps them up at night? You need to find the way that you ask that question in your own voice, but it needs to be about the person that you're talking to and not just about the message that you're trying to get across. Because the best way you can get across that message to them in a way they can hear it and receive it is by addressing it in such a way that it's specific to them in their lives. And the only way you can do that, unless you know them, if you know them personally, you might not have to ask that question because maybe you've already had the conversation. But if you don't know them personally, then you need to ask the question. You need to find out what's going on and what keeps them up. You might be able to. You might be able to find some information there. But normally it's better when that person's had a chance to express it themselves or to tell it to you. I'm just trying to think of like what my... I will tell you that one of the other ways that we were able to do this was we actually did use technology. And I'm not just talking social media. I'm talking about using texting. I'm talking about, we actually had a young man, Jake DeGroot. So typically in the United States, we have a list of registered voters. You have their address, you get a list, you go knock on their door. But in this district, there's so much movement. The person behind that door might or may not be the person on your list. In New York, as a New Yorker, I've never had somebody canvass my door, like come and talk to me about a candidate, to this day. Normally, if somebody's knocking on my door, I'm like, did I order food and I forgot? Well, you know, like, what are they doing? How did they get up here? Like, what's going on? And I actually had a number of canvassers talk to me about how they would carry their lunch, and so somebody would think they were delivering to somebody, and that's how they'd get in the building. But what we ended up doing a lot of times was talking to people at public events or coming off the subway or out on the street outside the grocery store. And so we needed a way to be able to capture those people who were really excited about her. So Jake developed this thing that at the time we called Van Gogh. Now it's being created as its own entity called Reach. But it allowed us to pull up, again, our system, I understand, is a little bit different. I'm just using this as an example. It allowed us to pull up, okay, this person is a registered voter in this district. How likely are you to vote for her? You can mark them. If they're really excited, you could get their cell phone number and put it in. You could get their email address. And we could say, hey, if you really want to get involved, we can have somebody contact you about the next time to canvass or the next time to put up posters, whatever it is you're interested in, or working on the behind the scenes with texting or phone calling. So technology got used, the social media. Alexandria right now, she turned 29 just before the election, the general election. So she was 28 during the primary. She's grown up with social media. It is a part of her life. You know, so when you see, even to this day, a tweet come out on her account, that is her. Instagram, there is nobody behind that camera telling her, here's what you need to do, or here's what you're talking about. That is her. And I think she's been amazing at using it to authentically connect with not only her constituents, but as I'm seeing across Europe, but even before, after the primary, we had people from Asia following our canvassers around because they were really excited about her and what she'd done. And I actually had a crew from, I think this was the group from France, who was talking about, she came in and talked to me and she said, we in the rest of the world, so she was representing, she's like, are just so excited to have somebody else represent the United States who is not your current president. Like, we're so hungry for that. And to have somebody to speak to our issues and like, what, oh my God, this is like manna from heaven. So there was a vast interest. But what she is that is her. That's authentically her. It's her being her. Like when she did the first ones where she was cooking, she likes to cook. It was her happy place.
Popcorn with peppers? No way.
No popcorn with peppers. Hey, everybody does their own thing. But you know, like recently, I know she was putting together IKEA furniture because she's got to keep 2 homes. So she had to, you know, what she found with especially Instagram was to use it in as part of kind of her daily world, but to talk about the things that people wanted to hear about. And she actually answers oftentimes a lot of questions from folks. Yes, she is. But in, at least to me, in one of the best ways, one of the absolute best ways, and the type of person that I'm really excited that we have out there influencing the world. So with that, do you have more questions?
I have much more questions.
Okay.
But maybe to connect to what you said in the end, use of social media and how that changed your campaign. I know that, you know, it's nice to see Alexandria talking to us
Yes.
personally almost via
But how did it go
Instagram
in
and
the
Twitter.
campaign?
But not all is good and well. I mean, we also have a vast majority of, not a vast majority, but a lot of hate speech and fake news also coming up in the social media. How did you deal with this bad side of social media in the campaign?
So I'm going to talk about a couple of points here, but the first one that I love to relate on that particular issue is that, so Instagram and Twitter are all her, but because of the way we used Facebook on the campaign and because Facebook is the largest social media site, we actually used it to organize people who were supporting. And thus we ended up with campaign folks who were actually on and administering the Facebook account. And we started out with a group that was both male and female. We ended up with a predominantly female group because we had a number of the guys who came back and told us, you know, I've heard women talk about the kind of ways that they get addressed on social media, and, you know, I thought you guys were exaggerating. Honestly, to be honest, I thought it was an exaggeration. But the way these guys write in the direct messages and they think they're talking to her, you guys have been downplaying this shit. There is no way. You've not been telling us how bad this is. I can't take this. I literally want to go find them and wring their necks. Where do they get off on this? How are they doing? I mean, these guys were incensed, and they're like, I can't do this. I can't. Most of the women were like, yeah, it's par for the course. That's what happens. Don't give them any energy. And that's where I would say that, like, Alexandria, all of us were like, don't feed the trolls. Don't feed them. Don't give them energy. Don't give them attention. Don't acknowledge them. It doesn't mean you don't ever address something that's particularly egregious or something that is in error about your candidate or you, but it means that it's never the focus. You find another way to address it. You don't give them the attention. So, and one of the things is Crowley, the opponent, literally ran against Trump. They did not think that there was any way Alexandria was even going to make the radar, so there was no point in mentioning her. There's actually a tweet, and this is where I say Alexandria, she's primo. They kept talking about Crowley and the fact that he had a primary challenger. They would never list her name, and our New York Times was particularly egregious about this. So Alexandria did a lovely tweet, a play on Game of Thrones. This girl has no name. And it was one of those things that people were like, oh yeah, that's, you know, it called them out on the fact that whenever they would talk about him having a primary challenger, that he had one, they'd never name her. And it's something that I think a lot of female candidates deal with a lot of times, that they're not even seen as an actual real candidate with an actual chance. So not feeding into it. And where Crowley kept talking about Trump and like, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. and fight against Trump. We never talked about him. Why would we feed that narrative? Why would you give him even one more mention via a tweet or a Facebook or a quote? He's got too much attention as it is. No, 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 no. You don't feed the trolls and you don't feed those in the limelight. Talk to the issues, talk to the people, talk to the district. So that's one of the other ways. And the thing I will say is that Alexandria has been really good about figuring out, those places to correct where people have been wrong about something they've said about her, and to call out people who've called her out for things that they shouldn't be. And some of that example is when she's talked about wearing her red lipstick and her hoop earrings and making it okay, I think, for a lot of female candidates to be female and to celebrate that. And not saying that every single candidate does this. They don't. There's plenty of them who don't. My current candidate who's running for district attorney, she doesn't even wear makeup. And that's good too. What she talked about was, I'm being me. And it's okay for me to be me and be a representative from my district. And to be a woman doing that. So she's called that out most recently. There were people who were talking about her. This is not now on the campaign, but she's still doing this. And so I bring up these things is that they were like, oh, well, she's talking like a different way. She's, and in the U.S. we call it code switching. And if you're talking to your friends, it's not the same way you talk to your grandparents, right? I mean, we all do this. The way I talk to my buddies or the way I talk to somebody at work isn't necessarily the way I talk to my sisters. But when you're talking to different constituencies and different groups, there might be a bigger change. And she did that. She spoke like a woman of color from the Bronx who has been in those same seats that the people she was talking to were in. And she was being herself, and she was being real, and people were calling her out trying to say she was fake. And when other people were defending her, what she did was like, yes, this person is on point. I was code switching. I was speaking to the audience, and I was speaking to them the way that I would because they're my neighbors, because they're my friends. And it was a different audience than when I go someplace else and speak. When I'm speaking in Congress, she's speaking to a different audience. She's going to do that differently. There's a different tone, there's a different pace. It depends on who you're talking to. So she's particularly adept, and I think it's something that I continue to try and learn, at adjusting her. She doesn't adjust what she's saying. She doesn't adjust her values or her message or any of these things. She is true to all of those, but she adjusts how she says it, depending on who she's speaking with. So I think that that's something with the social media. And the other thing, though, is she just was on MSNBC, and somebody said something that she doesn't, as far as policy, she doesn't agree with. And one of her supporters was like, oh, that person's a stupid idiot. And she's like, no, we do not use their tactics, and we don't attack that way. We can discuss the merits or the lack of them of this particular issue, but we do not do personal attacks on people's intelligence. That's not the way we do things. And to me, that is a beautiful thing in terms of modeling the actual behavior that we want to see, even from people who may not agree with us on everything. Like, to me, that is just primo. And it's what we all need to be doing, myself included, that it is not about attacking somebody else personally, but you can disagree with them on an issue and on a position.
Thank you so much. You gave me great transition points to my next topic. But I return more or less to the same video that we saw in the beginning. Women like me are not supposed to run for office. Women like me. Mm-hmm. She says later on, going into politics was not the plan. Mm-hmm. Why isn't, for young educated women who wants to see the change in the world, why going into politics is not the plan?
Ooh, that's a big societal question. I think some of it is the way that we socialize our young women. I actually was just telling Sonia this story about, I think it was Sonia, it might have been, I've told a few stories a few times, so bear with me, guys, sorry. And my nephew is 6 years old. He's going to be 7 in June. His best friend, her name is Emma. She's 7. She turned 7 in February. And Emma is one of these little girls that I look at her and I think of myself. Because most people look at her and go, she's bossy. She's always telling other people what to do and how to do it. And she's the one making the rules of the game and saying this is what we will do and this is what we won't do. And by the time most of those little girls get to middle school, they're no longer doing that. Why not? Because we as a society, and I include myself, tend to socialize these young girls to think that that's not acceptable behavior for them. And what I told her mom was, I'm like, do not do this. Please, I will back you up. Emma is a spitfire. I'm going to run Emma's presidential campaign one day. Like, Emma is the girl that we want to keep doing this stuff, okay? And I'm gladly going to run my nephews, but he might have to be vice president. So, like, seriously, like, and I will tell you something else. Like, Emma came up already at 7. She's already been taught that as a little girl, you go to the authority figure to get them to intervene, right? They're on the playground. Well, Titi Vigi's got rules on the playground. Titi Vigi doesn't intervene unless there's blood or, like, you know, like some serious bruising going on. Like, no, playground rules, you need to figure out how to work in society, right? I'm not getting involved. So Emma comes to me. She's talking about my nephew. It's like, Gabrielle won't let me go down the slide. He won't let me. I'm like, Emma, you are a very strong girl and a very smart one. I know you can figure out how to go around him. Emma looked at me. Okay. She went and figured out how to go around him. And she told him to stop, that wasn't acceptable. And I was like, yes. And I realized that what I'm telling Emma is not what I was told, you know, but it's the kind of thing. And I'm also telling my nephew, yo, it's great to be out there. It's great to be roughhousing and playing, but you also need to consider who you're with and what you're doing and how else you're impacting others, which is also not something that at least the boys that I grew up with were told. You know, so I think it's a societal question. It's something that we all have a part in. But I also know from Alexandria's personal story that where she grew up, she was one of the few people with, you know, a mom who was cleaning houses, and her dad did run a small architectural firm, but, you know, it was in the Bronx. That's not considered cool place to be, you know. She was told by teachers. She actually won second place in a national United States science fair when she was a senior in high school. I remember her talking to me about a teacher telling her not to even enter that fair, that there was no chance, she had no chance to win it. So why even waste her time? I recall her talking about guidance counselors that help you apply for university, telling her, oh, you shouldn't apply there. There's no way they will accept you. And so when people have asked Alexandria, how did you decide to run? How did you, like, ignore what everyone was saying? She's like, they've been telling me no, I couldn't do it my whole life. Why am I going to start listening to them now? I've done everything they said I couldn't do. And she continued the process. You know, like, and sometimes this is one of the things where I feel like I definitely have learned from my millennial sisters. Sometimes you just got to ignore the people telling you it's not possible. You just got to know it is. This brings up another, the first wave of millennials, I hearken to the people born in 1982. I know lots of different people have different ages, but I remember the first person I ever worked with, her birthday's February 6th, 1982, and I remember when she came into the workplace. She'd just gotten her master's, she was all cool, and I remember her sitting down with me after about 6 months, and she's like, Vigi, I don't get this. Why aren't these people listening to me? I've got a degree. I'm doing the work. Why are they only listening to VPs? What's going on here? And I, as a Gen Xer who'd been working for years, was like, she's got a point. Why am I sitting back here thinking I don't have something to contribute? When she, who's 10 years younger than me, is going, I know what the heck I'm talking about. Why aren't they listening to me? And I'm like, I still learn. I still learn every day. And I learned that from Sheena. And I learned from Alexandria. You can't necessarily listen to the doubters. If you believe, you can make it possible. And as long as you're celebrating the wins along the way, you are winning, and you attract more opportunities to win. So in terms of women not wanting to run, dude, I told you the story to start with about the guys not being able to hack it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that they haven't had to deal with it, so they were like, this is awful. I think that we as a society socialize women to be the supporters, the followers, the people who come in and do a lot of the emotional and unseen labor of organizing, of doing the calendar, or making sure the chairs are set up, or making sure somebody's welcoming people at the door, or making sure so-and-so gets called to be there, or a lot of this work that doesn't necessarily get to be seen. And I'm going to just mention it in terms of the current campaign I'm working on. We were going to march in a parade. So there was one guy who contacted the parade people and got the art number. Great, and there was another person who put it out on Facebook. Yay, let's come. But the women who set up the tent where everybody was going to meet, the ones who brought the stuff there, the ones who made sure that people were going to be able to be there and brought them with, who did the following up, wasn't seen. And even my candidate, who is a queer woman, was not seeing this. And this is why I say it's a societal thing that we all need to be a part of the transformation, myself included. Because I noticed it, because I was like, hey, there's been this great thank you to these young guys who did actually, it's kind of easy. I signed up with the parade crew and who put out the tweet going, hey, come and be with us. It's valuable work, but it's not the only work being done. And so I think that a lot of times women find themselves doing the work that is not by our society collectively seen. And I think that we all can do stuff to change that. I was talking to Mia earlier today about something. My sister works in the television industry. So she at one time worked on The Tonight Show in the script room. She worked on Saturday Night Live as a script supervisor. She's been in this milieu. And even there's not that many women. And she talked about this group of women who something that they do is whenever there's a meeting, they do, maybe there's only 2 women in this meeting, and all the rest of it is men. So a woman will say something. They might not pay attention. 5 minutes later, some other guy says exactly what this woman did. And everyone's like, yeah, that's it. So the other woman who didn't say it will go, you know what? I'm really glad that you brought that up since Jane over here already mentioned that. Isn't it great that she brought it to our attention? Or something like that, where she acknowledges the woman who mentioned it before. Because this happens all the time, we don't necessarily notice it. And I'm talking about even us women. Like when I'm talking about society, I'm not pointing out and going, oh, the guys have to change. We all have to make notice for this. The other thing that I'm loving is when I'm seeing the guys actually be the ones to point it out. When the men are the ones standing up, and I'll use Shoykot. Shoykot is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's chief of staff. And he's about, I think, 6 years older than her. But people will invariably, to this day, think that he's the one running the show. He's the one making the decisions. He's the one designing everything. Shoykot is the first one to stand up and tell you, you were wrong. She's the boss. I am an advisor. He does amazing work. This man does not have to work and works his patootie off. But he's the first one to tell you that Alexandria is the one who's running the show. And the more men we have like that, who are willing, he does incredible work. He's actually listed in, I don't know, Politico or somebody did some sort of list of the most powerful people in Washington, and he's actually on the list. I don't even know if they put him higher than her or not, but he's on this list, right? It's great. But what I love is somebody like that using their power and their privilege as a male for the societal good of pointing out that she, as a woman, is the one who is really running that particular ship. And I think that it becomes incredibly strong when you have one guy talking to some other guys about the fact that these women know what they're doing. Sometimes you need one to stand up there and help out and say that. The other person I will mention is Frank Llewellyn. So Frank Llewellyn, from 2001 to 2011, was the head of the Democratic Socialist of America, which I know it's not a party, guys. It was pretty small. We are up to 55,000. We might be at 60,000 at this point. I mean, like, we're really excited. And in New York, that's about, we tend to be 10% of the overall group. But when I was a brand new spanking campaign manager of that, I'm like, well, if they do ever decide to pay attention to us, they're actually going to go after our financials. I need somebody who can help. So I went to the DSA in general. I was like, do you guys know anybody who can help me by being our treasurer and know how to file these reports and stuff. And Frank's like, I can do that, because he had to do it before. Well, the great thing about Frank is Frank just turned 70. And when you have an old white guy calling to find out he gets those answers a lot faster than I do sometimes. And I will tell you what, my biggest supporter, Frank Llewellyn. One of my major people supporting me. I'm like, Vigi, I don't understand why you think that you don't know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about. Go out there and do it. Seriously, one of my best supporters to this day. So when I talk about this as being all of us and as a societal thing, it's not even just an age thing. There are supporters out there at all levels. And I think that a lot of us, like I said, it's society. We are socialized to look at this as something that guys do, or it might be like Caroline Kennedy. You know, nice Kennedy name, legacy, right? Like, yeah, you know, somebody whose family was in the business. But I think for really to be a representative republic or democracy, you need people in all walks of life, all levels. You need men, you need women, you need all ages.
Thank you so much. We're going to give opportunity also for questions from the audience, and I'm sure this will come up again, but I'm just going to open a third topic, and maybe we can find each other amongst these three topics. Alexandria and yourself, you call yourself a democratic socialist, which is probably the closest to what we have to social democracy in Europe, I guess. And also with Bernie Sanders and with these young American politicians, we are seeing a very positive reinforcement of this social activism and democratic socialism and so on. But on the other side, in Europe, we see a disbelief in values of politics. We see traditional social democratic parties losing their voters and losing their support. What did we do wrong? What is the narratives of social democracy that is losing the touch with its voters and its members?
And here's where me, as an American, I'll give you my perspective, but I honestly believe you guys probably know better than I do. Just because, I mean, part of my perspective is what I feel like, look, I understand that my Democratic Party is essentially to the right for you guys. I get that. But in the way that they're similar is that the neoliberalism that came in and came through as, hey, we're supposed to be a party for the people, but we're going to find a solution that's a corporate solution. We're going to find a solution that doesn't necessarily center the workers. And I think when you say that you're standing for ideals, but then you are acquiescing to solutions that don't align with those ideals, it's really hard for people to believe, okay, you say you have these values, but we're not seeing you vote these values. And I think that, to me, that's, to my mind, where the disconnect is. So that in order to come back to it is if you can come back to the values and the ideals, the centering of the workers, the centering of a society that actually looks to take care of people as a collective whole. And honestly, you know, we Americans, we sell the individual. Greed is good. No, don't buy it. It's not. It's the collective good that actually gives you the freedom to be an individual. Because if you don't have that basis, are you really free? And I mean, for me, I look at healthcare. Right now in the U.S., we've got insulin going for $300 a month. Like, people can't afford that. They can't. So how free are you when you can't even afford your life-saving medication? And I know that's an extreme example. I know that for you guys, in a way, what you're looking to do is better fund your existing universal types of healthcare. But you have to be able to remind people that that's what you're actually fighting for. And I do think that I'm feeling really excited because I do feel like you guys have people who are willing to make those reminders and who are willing to be out there talking to people about the values that the social democrats have and have had. But you've got to get back to the folks where they can actually believe and trust that you guys will stick to it once, you know, you've been in power. I know that in different parts of Europe, you may or may not be in power now, but they've got to trust that the values that you're putting out there are the values that you will use to make the decisions in office. And if they can't trust that, it's really hard to get them to vote for you.
Thank you so much. We're going to try to give this speech and this floor as much transparency and democracy as possible. And VG said, I want questions. So I give the mic to any questions from your side as well.
And I'm open to all different kinds of questions. Yes, I know that some people have been curious about Alexandria or curious about things that we did. So please, I mean, if I don't have an answer, I will honestly tell you I don't know the answer.
Tell us about Hillary.
Tell you about Hillary. What about Hillary?
Whatever your perspective.
So I don't know if you guys have heard, in the United States there's the Ivy League schools, which are really elite schools. Yes. Well, Boston University is not one of the Ivy League, but it's close to one. Yes. The women's Ivy League is called the Seven Sisters. And Hillary and I both went to a Seven Sister school. By the way I got there was they did blind acceptance, which means that they didn't look at whether you could afford it. They only did this for 2 years because there were too many people who couldn't afford it who got accepted. I was part of that crew. So I'm literally part of the two poorest classes Smith College has ever seen. But Hillary was part of a wealthier class that went to Wellesley. In 2008, I started out as a Hillary supporter. I started out as somebody who was like, here's a woman who fought for healthcare. Here's a woman who's been doing the work, who's out there, who is like walking the walk. But where I got lost was healthcare was still important to me, and I still believed that we as Americans could come to an agreement on doing it. And I heard her starting at a point of what felt to me like compromise. And like maybe where you get to when you go and fight the good fight. But when you start at the compromise point, you're going to end up with less. And that was really, I was a salesperson. At this point, I was a marketer. But marketing, sales, banking, you don't ever start your negotiation in the middle. How do you do that? But I also know that she is part of the female politicians who had to weather a really ugly storm where women are under a greater microscope, where, I mean, the number of things that they can actually prove Trump has done compared to the things that they wanted to say that she had done, and they've never been able to prove it. They've never... Yes, but her emails, is crazy. So I actually have a lot of respect for Mrs. Clinton as an amazing stalwart who's been out there on the front lines of our political system, literally receiving like I want to say slings and arrows kind of thing, but like literally much undeserved critiques. But my difficulty was that she was going in a direction that wasn't what I wanted to go for. Like Obama switched once elected, but when he was talking about things that I was hopeful for, like the hope and change concept. I want the change. We got the hope. I want the change. And like for me, being the daughter of veterans and the granddaughter of a veteran, anybody who's willing to vote for war isn't somebody that I'm really comfortable with. I understand what our U.S. military sometimes has done, even in the service of what we might consider good, but I've also seen over and over again the things that are not good and that have actually been hurtful. And it's really hard for me to support anyone who actively supports that aspect. I mean, I'm all for supporting our veterans. I'm all for supporting those people who've been hurt and come back with like post-traumatic stress and things like that, but I'm not okay with just continuing to fund our military-industrial complex willy-nilly as if it is the only way that we are able to have a really strong economy. That's really hard for me. And what I saw, again, I'm speaking from the eye here, of Hillary was somebody who was still in thrall to that, also in thrall to Wall Street, and in thrall to what had us bailing out our richest corporations and banks rather than our actual people. So.
Hands up and you'll get the mic.
Okay, so how do you see the role of the whip of the party?
How do I see the role of what?
Whip, the one that
The whip.
forces the MPs to vote. Would you say that that's a good thing in democracy or not?
It's not a question I've really thought about that much. I definitely think based on the form of government that we have, there's a certain amount of need for it. But this is why Alexandria talks about this and why I'm a strong believer of the inside-outside. So you need people who are inside the party and you need people who are in Congress, but then you need a whole activist crew outside that are pushing the party and pushing the representatives in the direction that we need them to go. So I actually am really fond of the whips that are outside of Congress, that are the activists going, nah, this isn't what we sent you there for. So I understand the needs for them. I understand why we have them. I honestly don't pay a lot of attention to them nor think about them all that much because normally I'm allying with or figuring out how I help some of the activists on the outside going, no, climate change is real. Hello, wake up. As just one example.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. More questions?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for coming here, for giving this talk. It's been very interesting. And second, you've been talking a lot about how Alexandria is genuine, her use of social media, and I've been following her on Instagram, and she's really good on social media, and fun and interesting and engaging and stuff. But what my question is, don't you think that in a way this is sort of dumbing down the politics a little bit? Because now all the other candidates, especially in the Democratic field, they are trying to be genuine. They're making their videos from their kitchens and stuff like that, and it's all good and great. But I'm afraid that in the future we'll have like competition of personalities and not of ideas, of political ideas. I mean, it's great that if candidate is genuine and friendly and sort of approachable on social media, but what I really want to know is what are their ideas, and how good are they in making them into law and how to act.
And I would say that you're a little bit more of the exception from the general voters. And the reason I say this is that when I try and talk to people who are not part of this and who wouldn't necessarily be at one of these things, for example, my sister will say, Vigi, my eyes are glazing over, you're putting me to sleep. The other thing I will say is for the people who really want the meat of an idea, there's still websites where you can go and you can get that. Some of the people in the vying for the Democratic election have actually gotten a lot of heat, so to speak, because their websites don't speak to any of their issues. Alexandria always had issues on her website. When she's talking in her kitchen, she's talking about issues as much as she's talking about the other things that are going on. And her Twitter feed has always been very much targeted at the people who are really interested in what are the issues and where does she stand on them. Will she cover everything? No. And part of that is a response to the very people that she's representing, that there are certain things that they are definitely interested in and that she covers more than the things that maybe others are of interest, but they're not as interesting to her constituents. The other thing about it is I actually give the electorate a lot more credit, because I think what they're taking away from these is they can tell when somebody's just doing it because, hey, this is the new thing to do. And look, I will tell you, I don't see Bernie Sanders doing this. But you can go back to 1989 as a mayor, and he's talking about climate change. He's talking about needing women in business. You can go back to his first speech on the floor in 1991 and hear most of his stump speech. And, there are other people who are doing this. But I've actually heard some people talking about Warren doing it, and I don't think she cooked. I think she drank wine and, talked to people. Do you know what I mean? She did what she loved. She loved drinking some wine, So again, I tend to be an optimist looking for the silver lining, but I actually think that I give the electorate a lot more credit for what they're getting out of those videos is who is this person? They can go to the website, they can go to the articles to read about where does this person stand on the issues. And sometimes they will try and get a question in there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
How did you tackle the security issues in general? I'm not speaking only the war problem and migrants, but also the small crimes and big crimes in the cities. Thank you.
So because Alexandria, so this actually comes in a little bit more on the race I'm working on now, or advising on, which is a district attorney's race. And that actually deals a lot more with the criminalization. But on Alexandria's race, because she was a lot more on the federal level, we tackled it about talking about the decriminalization. Now we would call it the decriminalization of poverty and the decriminalization of not being a white person in America. And not, I mean, the US, we have more of our population locked up than China. Than I think than the Soviet Union did when they were trying to suppress dissent. Like, we've made it a business. And so we talked about it in terms of the fact that that's not part of the values that we aligned with. That Alexandria was not here for how do we pump more money into building cages that we fill. In terms of people feeling safe, I love the way that Tiffany's come at this. So she's the candidate. I don't know that on Alexandria's campaign we got as much focus on this. So I'm taking this more from Tiffany. But she actually talks about decriminalizing poverty. And that when you take the very money that instead of you would use to lock somebody up for a year, and you use that to actually support them and their needs, it actually costs you less money and makes a safer society. And the example that I will use is right now, Queens County will actually arrest people and charge them for what we call fare evasion. So you go to ride the subway or the bus and you don't pay. $2.75. Okay? But we have a cash bail system, which means this person didn't have $2.75 to pay for the fare. Now we're going to lock them up and say that they need to pay. It could be $50. It could be $100. Well, they can't pay that. Great. That means we're sending them to jail, and some of these people sit in jail for over a year. That can cost us as taxpayers up to $144,000. That's a business. That is not making our society safer. A fare evader is not helping. Why are we spending money to lock them up? Why are we spending money to charge them? Why aren't we giving them a Metro card? Seriously, it would cost us less. I'll give you a year's Metro card. It would cost us less money. And it would make for a safer society. Because people aren't running from the police because they're worried that they're going to lock them up for something that honestly is a crime of poverty. Not even of trying to get something over. I would say most Americans, when they do polls, believe that people should be able to consume marijuana. In Queens County, we still lock people up because they were smoking a joint on the corner. Why? Why? You know, like, and the way Alexandria talked about it was very much about our need to focus on decriminalization and actually changing federal laws to, like, end the war on drugs, as an example. And yeah. So that's the way that she talked about it a little bit more. And then Tiffany's talking about it. And like, I love one of the things that she's talked about, which is decriminalizing sex work. And she's talking about both the people doing the work and the clients. And the thing is, people talk about, well, what about human trafficking? Well, the most people likely to be able to identify human trafficking are either the consumers of sex work or the people who do sex work. But if they can't go to the authorities to say, I think this person's in trouble because they're worried about getting locked up, then we aren't keeping those human trafficked people safe. We're not finding a way to protect them. So these are some of the ways that I'm hearing about it talked about in Queens. But like I said, on Alexandria, she actually opened the door to greater conversations about this stuff. But we did not talk about it quite as much on the campaign as it's being talked about now.
Okay. Any more questions? I may be challenging Sonia or Mia, our participants as well. Yeah? Of course.
Yeah.
How big is the constituency of the winning candidate in New York?
So for the district attorney, or for so the district attorney, Queens County is home to 2.5 million.
So it's a bit bigger than Slovenia. How many people did you have as volunteers?
Well, that's for the district attorney. For Alexandria's race, her district is 705,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah, and of the people who could vote in the primary, because New York has really specific rules, you had to be registered voter. So there's 350,000 registered voters, but you also had to be registered in the Democratic Party, and there were 205,000 of them.
Okay.
Of those, for the primary, there were a total of maybe 32,000 who came out to vote, and about somewhere between 16 and 17,000 of them voted for Alexandria. There was also a Republican candidate. He didn't get a lot of votes, but it's why it wasn't exactly that's for the general election. Sorry, I'm mixing up. But yeah, Alexandria got a little over half, like 57%.
Okay, but how many volunteers did you have in
volunteers.
the campaign?
It really varied. So if you're talking about people who regularly volunteered, we probably had about 150, but we had probably closer to 450 or 500 people who volunteered at least once. So it was fairly, and the thing about it is some of our volunteers weren't from the district. Like, I don't live in her district. There were a lot of people from my district that were excited to be that close to a real race. We had people who came in from New Jersey, who came up from Pennsylvania, who came down from Connecticut or Massachusetts, and who came from other parts of New York State. So it wasn't just the people within her district. There were a lot of people who were really, really excited to be somewhat close to somebody who was finally talking seriously about these issues in a way that they could relate.
Thank you.
One more question over there in the back.
Hi. As far as I could follow the campaign and everything, when you came into the campaign, you were like the underdog. You had no pressure that you have to win or whatever. But still, what did you see as the breaking point of the campaign? And since you are now continuing campaigning for other, what do you see are the trends in campaigning? Because as far as we can see, it's more about the personality, not the party membership, or it's more about the personality, the values the people are talking about, not more like this left, right, green, blah, blah, whatever. It's more about the personality. So what do you see as the trends for future in elections? And the third thing is what, sorry.
It's okay, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, okay. What do you think about Beto O'Rourke?
Okay. Number one was about what did I see as the breaking point. So when I started, it was just getting on the ballot was the first thing. That was literally our first litmus test, is that everybody was like, there's no way. You're not going to get on the ballot. Once we were on the ballot, our struggle became getting people this girl has no name, getting coverage. Even in the local press was our next kind of hurdle. The other thing that we were working on was, like I said, with the whether it was the unions or the local churches or different groups were we can't come out and support you. It was getting access or getting direct connected to the people who were part of those groups who did believe in our message. And that was really a big part of the shifting. And literally, there were a couple of things. One that happened during the petitioning period, where she had done an interview with Now This, which is fairly up and coming on the edge of progressive side, in January. And they were going to have this video come out. Well, February, no video. We're partway through March, no video. And then finally the video from Now This dropped. Now here's one of the things that was difficult, is that Alexandria talked about how her identity informed her political positions, but she literally mentioned that at the end of her video, of her time with the interviewer. But when they cut it together, they put it at the beginning of her video, and it changed the entire dialogue. So though this video was helpful, it was only helpful when people got beyond that first segment, and a lot of people didn't. The next thing was the viral video of her actually out there. She went to what we have community board meetings, and she went to a community board meeting, and she literally spoke as an advocate on behalf of the people who were fighting against this huge behemoth of a building being built in their neighborhood. And it went viral, especially among voters. So this isn't something that went viral worldwide, but the voters were really interested about, hey, here's this young woman speaking truth to some folks who need to hear it. And that was where we started seeing more volunteers come in. And then her actual video became a sensation, like for at least people who follow political stuff. And these were kind of like, each time it pushed us a little bit further. When Alexandria started her campaign, she had, I think she said less than 230, it was about 230 followers. By the time of the primary, she was up to 30,000. And now you guys can see, I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Okay, so that's a little bit on some of the breaking points. So on the trends, I actually don't think it is as much about personality as it is about values, and it is about people getting a sense of whether or not they can trust. So what sometimes I feel like we're seeing as a personality contest is actually people trying to show the electorate, here's who I am, and this is, by knowing who I am, you can trust me. To me, I don't think that's a personality contest. I think that that is actually the way that people tend to vote is, do I have a confidence in this person? And I don't think it's devoid of issues. I just don't think that issues are where people really start when they're deciding on who to vote for. I think they start with values and a gut reaction. Beto Francis O'Rourke. Beto was a great candidate to run against Cruz. Beto would have been amazing as a new senator from Texas. Phenomenal. He did not win. I think that there are other candidates that I would rather see, and there's other candidates who've definitely spoken to the issues that I care about. So I appreciate what Beto's done in terms of moving Texas more purple, and I'd love to see him do some more stuff in Texas. At least until I get him coming out as a Democratic Socialist. Which he can't necessarily do if he's running in Texas. They're still working on that. Though I will tell you our Austin chapter is growing. It's growing nicely. So is Houston. We've got some good chapters in Texas, so don't take it like there's none. They're just not quite at that level of growth yet. We need a few more years.
Do I have any more questions? One more lady.
Melanie.
Our first lady.
Melania. I find it fascinating that her major effort is against bullying. And I figure that she's got some personal experience with this that she's drawing from as to why being against bullying is incredibly important. I do feel like she's a woman in the spotlight, and there are critiques that happen on her that I don't know that we'd see of a first gentleman, even one who had such a partner. I don't quite know what else to say because I don't focus a lot on her. Honestly, I don't follow a lot of what's going on unless it bubbles up. I honestly am not listening that much to what she has or has not said. So I actually feel really uninformed to speak on her other than what I've just said. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do.
Okay, sleep on it, and maybe you can join us also tomorrow at the Faculty of Social Sciences, where Vigi is speaking at 2 o'clock. But for now, if there are no questions, I will maybe thank you a lot.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also on behalf of Party of European Socialists and the Social Democrats, that you joined us here. We have quite an important task before us. We are just before the European elections, and I'm sure that this election will actually determine the fate of Europe for the next 5 years, and I'm sure that you yourself, as Alexandria as well, can inspire us to build and to have a vision for a different, greater, a stronger, more social Europe that will benefit and be closer to people.
And I do think there's a symbiosis here. So you guys
Definitely.
getting some social democrats into the European Union, more of them, would actually inspire us to move further along as well. So please,
Come on,
work
fight.
that strong.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.